Now, after months of negotiations, the IMF board is set to clear Ghana to access some $600 million support following a successful review of the fund's 3-year program with Ghana. This is our special programming for the joint IMF, Ministry of Finance and Bank of Ghana briefing. We are on DSTV channel 421, GoTV channel 125, and around the world on myjoyonline.com. We are your home of independent, fearless, and credible journalism. Please stay tuned in. Ghana will know its fate on whether it has qualified to receive another $600 million from the IMF. The International Monetary Fund is set to give final judgment on its first review of Ghana's program. This is likely to be reviewed at a joint press conference between the IMF and the Ministry of Finance. The IMF board is also expected to approve and disburse about $600 million, being second tranche after Ghana reached an agreement with its official creditors, which could place a freeze on its debt servicing obligation for the next 4 years. We'll be doing a 360 analysis of how Ghana has traveled the IMF journey over the period in here with my colleague Isaac Kofi Addo and other experts joining via Zoom ahead of that news conference. But first, we'll bring you a lot more from the Finance Ministry as and when we do get that feed. But let me start this whole thing with my colleague Kofi Addo here, because he has been going through the data to really understand what's happening. Kofi, you know, from the beginning of this whole conversation about whether Ghana will get the IMF deal to us getting our first tranche released, and now you've been going through all of these data to understand, you know, where we are. As of now, what's the fate of Ghana in all of these negotiations and arrangement, really?
Well, Kojo, what we are learning is that Ghana is likely to get the final approval tonight. And if we are able to do so, then we are going to join, you know, a tall list of countries in Africa that have been able to get some sort of funding from the IMF after passing their program first review. And so what we know is that Kenya was the first to do so this month of January 2024. They got about $941.2 million from the IMF after, you know, their first review. That was actually their 6th review of their program. Then there is Gambia. Gambia has also enjoyed $100 million after passing the review. And there is Mozambique that has enjoyed $60.7 million, dollars from the review. Now, there's something that we need to note here about Ghana's $600 million tranche that we may be receiving, tonight or getting the approval by maybe in the next 3 working days. The money should hit the account. The reason why our money or the disbursement on Ghana's side has delayed is because of the peculiar nature of this particular IMF deal. Unlike our 15th IMF program, this very IMF program is a little bit different, where we had to do a lot of debt restructuring. Okay, so on that note, doing debt restructuring, I'll come back to you. But absolutely, let me cross over to Zoom now and join Professor John Gachi, who is the head of the Dean of the School of Business, University of Cape Coast. Prof, grateful for joining us now. We are expecting a verdict from the IMF in a few minutes. But what is your own assessment of our performance under the program so far? Hello, Prof. Kindly unmute so we can hear what you're telling us, sir.
Yeah.
Great.
I think the performance have been creditable so far. This was also indicated by the IMF in their comments on the Ghanaian economy. So I think we have not performed badly. Even though there are some institutional structures we have to put in place. But of course, if you put all together, we are on course. We are obeying the conditions that have been set for us. And tonight's approval session, I believe, is very clear. IMF is not looking for the details. IMF is looking for assurance. The assurance seems to have been given. So the IMF is comfortable. Major players like the vice president of the World Bank has made comment to the effect that they are happy about what has been achieved. So I believe that Ghana will sail through and the 600 million will come.
Oh, okay. So it means that you're optimistic that indeed we're getting that $600 million. Well, it looks like we've lost Prof there, but we'll still bring Prof here into this conversation about Yeah, Prof, you're making a point, and I get a sense that you're optimistic that indeed this $600 million will hit Ghana's account. Prof, kindly unmute for me so we can follow you.
Oh, sorry. Okay, fine. Yeah, I say I'm very optimistic that will go through, because IMF is merely looking for assurance, and that assurance has been given, and then we are good to go. Okay. But thereafter, that is when the main work lies ahead. How we are going to bring on board commercial creditors to align with what has happened in a few days ago and today. That is where the issue is. Then again, we also will also start thinking about the political ramification of this. Yeah. Because number one, the 600 million coming means that we are adding on to the existing debt. The possible 300 million for World Bank means that we are adding to the existing debt. Then again, if you have a moratorium up to 2026, it means that you are piling debt obligations for another government. Okay. And that the political players will be concerned about what the situation regarding debt management in the country will be after 2024 elections. So it's not only for the fun of it that 600 million is coming, but it has other implications for consideration.
Okay. Now, you understand finance really well. So break it down for us. What does $600 million into an economy like that of Ghana mean, really?
Well, when it's applied very well, it means a lot. It can finance your budget to a large extent. But you asked me, 600 million hit the account of Ghana May. What happened? What have been the dramatic change? And what will be the dramatic change when 600 million comes the next 3 days or by Monday? So these are the issues we'll be interrogating. We are told that much of the money will be used to finance the budget. That is great, because Bank of Ghana is no more there to lend money to government to finance the deficit. So if you're going to use part of it to finance the budget, I don't have any question about that. But what item of the budget are you going to finance to make meaning to the people of Ghana? So those are the questions we should be asking. So I believe the grant of the money will create more space for discourse. Will help us to interrogate the governance dynamics. Will help us to discuss going forward how the debt management situation will be in another government come 2025 going, whether NDC comes to power or MPP comes to power. Those issues are relevant discussions.
You stay with me. Let me come in studio and then do this with my colleague Kofi. So what does the data say?
Well, let's go to our smart wall and start with our first slide to demonstrate to you the magnitude of Ghana's problem. So you have it there, the balance of payments challenge. This is actually the reason why we went to the IMF for support. So how much do we need each of these 4 years ahead, or maybe let's say 3 years ahead? So in 2023, the balance of payment gap is estimated at $3.3 billion, followed by 4.3 billion 2024, 4.3 billion in 2025, and 2026, 3.3 billion, 2027, we are hoping to reduce to somewhere around 1.7 billion. In total, this year till 2027, the magnitude of our balance of payment gap is estimated at $12.6 billion. Now, this $12.6 billion, right from the word go, you realize that what the IMF is giving us is probably just a drop in the ocean, because you have from this year up until 2027, you need 12.6 billion to solve your problems. The IMF is giving you maximum, let me even be diplomatic and say minimum $3 billion. Now, if you look at the next slide, then you appreciate the problem that we are talking about. So we go to the next slide, and you see the balance of payment gap there, 12.6. Now, what the IMF is giving us, plus the World Bank, if you put them together, we are looking at $2.82 billion in 2024. The focus is actually on 2024.
Okay. Now, just for the
yeah,
year 2024.
For the year 2024.
Okay.
Now that's how much they'll be giving us. This actually, I think it's between 2024 and 2027, the total. If you look at the data really well, 2027, the IMF may not be giving us anything, but we do not know whether the program will be extended. So from this period, in the next 3 years, we are expecting maximum $2.82 billion from the IMF and the World Bank. Now, this is the problem. This is the solution they are providing.
Okay.
So right from the word go, you can see the difference in here. Residual gap, that is $9.78 billion.
So this is how much we need to close this gap.
Absolutely. So that is why the IMF was very particular on debt restructuring, because they believe that once you are able to restructure your debt, then it should be able to give you this fiscal space for you to close that gap. And that is why they made the debt restructuring a key condition in almost all their disbursements, that without that, they are not really going to go ahead to disburse, because they know once they disburse, the amount that will be injected into the economy will not be enough to, solve the problem. Now, right from the word go, we said we want to restructure our external debt. What is the magnitude of that external debt that we are talking about? $30 billion. That is how much Ghana is owing its external creditors alone. Okay. If you bring it into cedis, we are looking around 400 billion Ghana cedis. $30 billion. Now, that $30 billion, we understand that not all of that debt is eligible for restructuring. Just about 20 billion of that debt is eligible for restructuring. And the reason why you have some of the debt not included is because they belong to the multilateral bracket. So debt owed to the IMF, the World Bank, the African Development Bank, those debts are not really part of the restructuring, because, they are multilateral organizations. They know how to give relief. So then you have about 10 billion already gone in relief. You have to tackle this 20 billion. Then we said that this 20 billion, let's find ways and means to share it among our bilateral creditors and our commercial creditors. So we looked at the debt and we saw that the biggest portion of the debt comes from the bilateral creditors. So we apportioned 14.6 billion to them, that the commercial, that this is the amount we are trying to restructure from the commercial guys, where the Eurobond market is a big player here. Now, at the bilateral side, $5.4 billion. We started with this. We've already sent proposal for that. So, the reason why we are tackling bilateral first is relatively easier, because if you look at the debt portfolio of Ghana, majority of the debt we have are fixed interest. And those that are fixed interest and somewhat free interest are somehow bilateral debt. It's the commercial debt that you are paying on average about 9.7% on the loans you take. Okay. And that is why you see it being a key component of the debt restructuring figure. About 73% of the debt burden currently. Bilateral is taking about 23%. Then we looked at this slide where it tells you about each of the creditors and how we intend to deal with them in terms of the game plan that we have. What is the game plan for the bilateral creditors? Our game plan is to gain debt moratorium. In simple terms, a freeze. And Prof spoke about the freeze. I mean, the freeze simply means that, you are supposed to exercise a certain debt obligation, but because you are broke and you do not have money, you say that, oh, Kojo, I'm owing you 100 cedis. I'm supposed to pay next week. But you know my pocket, so maybe give me up until, let's say, June. Let me pay. In that essence, it simply means that when you give me the freeze or the free space, when the time comes that I'm servicing the debt, you've not forgiven any portion of that debt. I'm going to pay in full. Just that you've given me time to pay back.
So in the layman's language, you say you're giving me room or space.
Absolutely.
To operate.
To gain more money and pay back. That is the agreements we've been able to reach with our bilateral creditor, or let me say the assurances that we've received from them. So including China, including there's the Paris Club, where there's France, there's Belgium, there are these big countries, UK, all of them involved here. Now, if you listen to experts, they will say that the reason why Ghana went with this game plan is because of that big guy called China. Because we know that if you look at templates across the globe, China doesn't really forgive. In terms of the debt restructuring, maybe the best China can do for you is to say that, well, let me extend the maturity period, or let me give you breathing space so that you pay later. They don't really write off debts. So the issue of comparability of treatment became key at the negotiation table. So if that is how China is seen, then all of us are not going to take haircut. Then let us all agree
that we'll give you moratorium.
We'll give you moratorium.
That
so
will
that
forgive you your debt.
Comparability of treatment. As simple as that. And that is what we were able to get. Now, this is the biggest portion of the debt restructuring and the most difficult and complex, sophisticated part. This is because you are dealing with creditors. We owe them about some 14.6 billion. These are creditors that, they are governed by legal systems and all of those. They are bonds. So if I bought Ghana's bonds today and I feel that they are not worth it currently, I can trade it off to you. So in essence, if Ghana is coming back to do restructuring, they may not come to me, but they may come to you. And that is why the external restructuring is key. And what we've proposed is a 40% haircut on interest. Now, this is a bit shocking. We looked at the annual, debt report, and we realized that if you look at the interest that Ghana deals with in terms of its debt, about 85.6% of them are fixed interest. Now, Kojo, 14%, very significant, is variable. It means that the interest rate can change at any point in time.
Based on certain factors.
Exactly. That is just the external debt. Now, people say, oh, we borrow, they give us grant, but that is not the case. If you look at the loans that we've taken, the loans that have free interest is just 0.4% of the entire external debt. It tells you that at the external level, we do not have significant amount of loans with free interest. So then we decided to look at the year 2024 and how the IMF money will bring relief to us. So in 2023, we estimated that we're going to get about $1.2 billion from the IMF. We couldn't get all. We got only 600 million. And the additional 600 million is now the current carry forward that we are possibly about to get tonight. And in 2024, it simply means that then we are going to get 600 million plus 720 million earmarked for this year.
So 1.32 billion in total.
Absolutely. And this money will not come cheap. You have crossed the hurdle for the 600 million, but for the 720 million, it will come in two tranches. 300, 310, I think 310 for May and then November. You need to pass all the reviews before you can get it, so it will not come easy. So we realized that then it means if we are able to get 600 million and get 360 million for both, then we could be hovering around the figure that you mentioned.
That's 1.32 billion in total.
In total. That is just from the IMF this year. Initially it was 720. And we will be getting 1.23. That's significant, but we need to work hard for that money. So, we decided to break down the Ghana's debt burden for 2024, you realize that the country is actually not in a very good position fiscally, because this is a country that is anticipating to spend 76.7 billion Ghana cedis to pay interest only on its debt. Now, interest only on its debt, if you convert it to dollars, and we are very generous and we use $1 to 10 cents, we are talking about close to $8 billion on interest alone. Now, if you add the interest plus the amortization, that means the principal plus the interest, that's what will give you this amount. And you realize that even the amount we are paying as interest is significantly higher than the amount we are expected to pay as amortization. That's
so interest payment is $5.59 billion.
Absolutely, and amortization is
$2.8 billion.
$2.8 billion. If you add the two, you are going close to about $8 billion, dollars that we are talking about. In fact, that is the reason why it has become imperative for us to go through this whole restructuring process, get the fiscal space to breathe, and all of that. Then we ask a very simple question. When the IMF money is injected into your economy, three things must begin to work. Inflation, there is depreciation of the currency, exchange rate must work, and then also your reserves must also begin to look good. So we started with the depreciation of the currency, and the red line you see here is how the cedi was depreciating against the dollar in 2022.
Okay.
And the blue line is how the cedi did same in 2023. So Kojo, you realize that in 2022 we started off somewhere March, cumulatively the cedi had lost about 15.6 billion, percent, followed through up until somewhere November 2022 that then the cedi had lost 54.2% of its value. So it means that more than half of the value of our local currency had been truncated.
Yeah.
It means that whatever that you have, if you want to convert it to dollars, you need like ×2 to be able to reach that same amount. Then we saw the IMF money coming in 2023, somewhere May. You could see fairly stable, although it depreciated, but it was not as sharp as what we saw in 2023. So maybe by the close of the year, we're hovering around 25% compared to 54%. So we're able to halven the depreciation of the cedi comparatively if you compare 2022 to 2023.
Which means that the 600 coming in will also further better the performance of the cedi against the dollar.
So we are projecting that it will come to help show up our foreign exchange, and then also get a lot of international reserve, get more import cover. And one other thing that we looked at is inflation.
Okay.
This is it's on the screen for you to see how inflation was behaving when we did not have the
money from the IMF. So in December 2022, is it 2022 or 2023?
That's
this 2022 was highest.
It was the highest.
And then it started dropping a bit.
4%. It started dropping when we had the money somewhere around May 2023. You could see it started, stabilizing. Then all of a sudden,
it dropped.
Seeing a significant drop in inflation to now 23.2%.
Okay.
And so a lot of factors. We are hoping that this, if it's approved today or tonight, and we get the money in the next 3 working days, we should see some of these economic indicators also, tagging along and improving.
So it sort of fulfills the keys that you brought earlier before that you said when the IMF money gets into your economy, certain things have to react.
Absolutely.
Your inflation, your depreciation,
your reserve.
And then we've seen the two.
We've seen the reserve also
responding positively. Let's bring in Professor John Gachi again. Prof, so you've seen what Kofi has done there. You've seen how the IMF money is impacting on the economy. Is this what we expect to be sustained, or you think that something might change? Well, Prof, can you hear me? Well,
is it to me?
Oh, great. Yes, Prof. So I wanted to find out from you. I mean, you've seen what Kofi presented, that when the IMF money gets into an economy, certain things react. And we've seen some positives. I mean, depreciation of the cedi has stabilized in a way. We've seen inflation dropping. We are now about to receive some $600 million. And I'm asking from you, because you really do understand these things. Do you foresee these performances to be maintained, or you think that something may probably change with this coming in?
Well, I think going forward, we further expect that this drop in inflation and stability of the currency, though at a very high level, will also begin to affect policy rate and the interest rate environment. So it will carry along with it some kind of moderation of the pressure for businesses, pressure for the business environment. That will be added on as the benefit of the IMF engagement.
Okay. Now, always I want to look at it in terms of what it means to the ordinary Ghanaian. I mean, what we see happening with inflation, with depreciation of the city, and this coming in. If I want to understand how it impacts my life, how should I see it? I mean, these are what the data is showing, but in real life.
Well, I'm not sure unemployment will reduce by a big margin because we have engaged the IMF. I'm not sure the business environment will improve by a great margin because we have engaged the IMF. But those things that will affect the individual at the micro level will have to do with the policy benefits that trickle down to them. And that is the quick thing we always ask. So it depends on the government how to make use of other development financing to propel the economy to benefit the people. For example, the 300 million that is coming from the World Bank, what developmental project are we going to invest them in order to impact on jobs, in order to impact on poverty alleviation, in order to impact on the climate for doing business? Those are the things that will affect the individuals. Those are the things that will affect households. Those are the things that will make sure that the IMF program is actually beneficial to the ordinary person and not for just for macroeconomic indicators' sake.
Okay, interesting. I'll come back to you, but let me cross over to the ground because Joy Business Editor George Rafi, who has really been at the forefront of all of this Ghana's negotiation with the IMF, is at the the grounds where this joint press conference will be happening, and George is joining us via phone. Now, George, grateful. You've been there. What can you tell us is happening there? George, if you're with me, I want to find out from you. You've been at the grounds where this is going to happen. We are expectant to know what the IMF and the Bank of Ghana Ministry of Finance have to tell us. Would you tell us? What can you report for us? I think we lost George there, but you had Prof there. I mean, in all of this, what matters is how the person on, selling in the Makula market, what the person selling in Agunam Kwanta market will benefit from this. And he explains that it has to come from the monetary policy rate as well. So when can we see this translate into the monetary policy rate so that it can affect you and I?
Well, so in economics, right, so you have the macro level and the micro level. The micro level is what you and I, if it affects our lives. At the macro level, they always say it's for government. I mean, the big figures, the inflation rate, the unemployment rate, and all the other indicators are for government. But at the macro level, the ordinary Ghanaian wants to be able to afford electricity. But currently, the IMF 600 million is coming in, but the ordinary Ghanaian is being taxed to pay a VAT of 15%. You get it? And in 2020, when COVID broke and we were all under lockdown, government came in to spend about 1 billion Ghana cedis to provide free electricity to those who fell within the lifeline. About 50% of bills were paid for those who are above the lifeline. Then in 2021, what we saw was that government then started introducing taxes like COVID-19 recovery levy, which was on consumption, going to affect the same people that we tried to save in 2020. Then in 2022, what we saw was that government started now to talk about, tariff adjustment, quarterly tariff adjustment, where in 2023 we saw tariffs going up more than somehow about 3 times in the first quarter, second quarter, third quarter. It was in the fourth quarter that we saw the reduction. Then currently,
because the argument was that we weren't paying realistic tariffs, and that also affected the sort of revenues that we needed to stabilize the energy sector.
I mean, but
and that's how that
people were also talking about the fact that we already had these revenue measures or mechanisms. We call them the special purpose vehicles, the ESLA and all those energy sector levies were introduced for these purposes.
Yeah.
But it looks as if that most of this, even the ESLA was part of the domestic debt exchange program. It means that something that must be, a mechanism or a special purpose vehicle that will bring in liquidity to pay debt is now actually in trouble. Can't even pay the monies that the bonds that people bought from that same bracket. So it became, a challenge. So when you talk about all of these macro indicators, they look like textbook indicators unless they begin to trickle down to the ordinary Ghanaian. So the business person out there doesn't really believe in the 23.2% inflation because they want to map a lower inflation to lower cost of borrowing.
Okay.
But the reason why we can't map it right now is because you have your government still in the capital space, borrowing so much from the domestic markets and attracting monies with high interest around 30%. So if government is paying 30%, and all the banks, like the Bank of Ghana reports show that all the commercial banks are now willing to borrow to the government. So when they have the money, they want to invest into the short-term government T-bills, and they leave the private person out there. So if you're a private business person and you go to the bank to borrow, your government is borrowing at 30%, you would have to pay a certain mark on it. So 31%, 33%. So until we start seeing the inflation rate coming down or mapping inflation rate to the policy rate, and also the private person also enjoying to borrow around maybe 23% or 25%, until that time, we will not see the effect at the macro level. We will only be talking about macro, the textbook.
25 is even still high.
Still very high.
Because if inflation is around 23%, of course, we should be doing something around that figure.
Yeah, but the reason why we can't do that is government is in the space.
So government takes that decision to borrow at a lesser rate.
Government cannot do that now because it had 2 means of borrowing.
Okay.
Treasury bills, bonds. Now you've collapsed the bonds market through your domestic debt exchange program. And so the only market or means you have for short-term liquidity is treasury bills. If you decide to pay less, it will not be attractive for people to bring more money, because now you need to get that same money you used to get from bonds and treasury bills from only treasury bills. So how do you attract people? Is to keep the rate high so that they know that they can buy 91 days and still get their money and still get higher profits.
Okay.
So until government decide that it is going to reduce the T-bill rate to, let's say, 28% or 25%, it will be very, very difficult for banks to still borrow to private people around 21 or 25%.
So it means that we cannot start jubilating over the 600 million coming in.
Well, 600 million, we can start to jubilate, but I mean, it will be relative or subjective, because 600 million will come to show up the CD. So it will be a good news for all of us. I mean, we were all worried when the CD was jumping in a discrete manner, changing from 12 CDs to 13 CDs to 15 CDs. But we saw some sort of stability in 2023 and we were all happy. And that is what we want to continue going forward in 2024. And you know, 2024...
So, Kofi, let me announce to our viewers that what you're seeing on your screens now are live pictures from the venue where the joint press conference will be happening. I mean, in your shot now is Ghana's Finance Minister, Ken Ofori-Atta. and we do expect to see the IMF officials there, and also the Bank of Ghana governor and his officials also there as well. So, I mean, this is in preparation to hear exactly what they have to tell us when this starts. But I guess that they will be starting any moment soon, and when they start, we will go there and bring that to you, Prof. So let me go to Prof now. Prof, you do. I mean, when I hear you guys speak, I do have the sense that, well, then I per se cannot start jubilating because 600 million is coming in, because most of the time I'm borrowing at a very high rate. What needs to change? Prof, please unmute so we can hear you. Hello, Prof. Are you there?
Yes.
Great. So, I mean, like I was saying, what needs to change so that at least we will see the bearing of all of these monies coming from the IMF on the lives of the ordinary Ghanaian?
Well, I think we shouldn't overly concentrate on trying to meet the conditions and the benchmark set for us, because in so doing, we will neglect the sensitivity to the business environment by piling taxes on them, they transferring that to us to consumers, and that will not be respite to consumers. So the government will be talking about reducing inflation and achieving some macroeconomic targets, but that will be just some story in the ears of household and and the business community. So we need to align. That is what we need to be doing. We seem to be overly concerned about satisfying the IMF conditions to the detriment of the benefit of the economy.
But Prof, if we do not satisfy if we do not satisfy the conditions, we are not getting the disbursement, which also comes to show, you know, our CD and our reserves as well. So we are caught in a fix. Practically, what can we do?
No, we are not. We are not caught in a fix. Okay. We need to balance.
Okay.
That is the way that you can satisfy increase in revenue mobilization by not creating disruptive environment and by not creating a very harsh environment for businesses. Because, as you know, if you create a very harsh environment for businesses, that is transferred to the consumer, and the consumer will not be happy, and the consumer will be distressed by the policies you are implementing.
All right, Prof.
At the same
Prof,
time that
Prof, kindly hold for me. Let's take you to the Finance Ministry and listen to this joint press conference. We are listening to the IMF boss, Stefan Rode, who is speaking now.
Adjustment in the fiscal position. Budget sustainability is being achieved by mobilizing domestic revenue and by improving the efficiency of public spending. Importantly, the program includes and will continue to include efforts to protect the vulnerable. For example, the 2024 budget has continued to increase benefits under the existing targeted cash transfer program, the Living Empowerment Against Poverty program, the LEAP, and it also boosted allocations toward the school feeding program. To support adjustments and enhance the resilience to shocks, ambitious structural reforms are being implemented in the areas of tax policy, revenue administration, public financial management, as well as to address weaknesses in the energy and the cocoa sectors. To restore public debt sustainability, the government has also made significant progress on its comprehensive debt restructuring. The domestic debt exchange was completed over the summer, and an agreement in principle was recently struck between the government and its official bilateral creditors. The government has continued to engage its private external creditors, and we look forward to seeing progress on this front in the weeks ahead. To control inflation, the Bank of Ghana has taken decisive steps, and these efforts are already paying off. Inflation was almost halved as it declined from 54% in December 2022 to close to 23% last month. Measures to preserve financial stability are also very central to the program. The Bank of Ghana and the government are taking steps to ensure banks rebuild their capital buffers. And last but not least, reforms are being implemented to encourage private investment, growth, and job creation. These are all essential ingredients to address current challenges and boost Ghana's prospects going forward. Ghana's performance under the program has been compelling, both in terms of meeting the quantitative objectives, for example, on budgetary performance, but also in implementing transformational reforms to make the economy more resilient. Importantly, despite the difficult global economic setting, the authorities' reforms are bearing fruit and signs of stabilization are emerging. Growth has proven more resilient than initially envisaged, and indeed we are revising our growth projection for 2023 from 1.5 to 2.3%. Inflation is declining rapidly. The fiscal and external positions have improved. Bank of Ghana's international reserves have been increasing, and exchange rate volatility has decreased. Notwithstanding the progress made in recent months, the road to full stabilization and recovery will be gradual. Addressing remaining challenges will require determination and steadfast policy reform and reform implementation. But today's news marks an important milestone in the road to recovery and towards building a flourishing economy that will benefit every Ghanaian. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the brief but very insightful remarks. We will now move to Dr. Addison from the Bank of Ghana. But before I yield to the governor, permit me to acknowledge our media partners who are picking this press conference live. We are live on GTV, Joy News, City TV, TV3, Metro TV, Asasi Radio, Oman FM, ABC News, GH, Wuntumi TV, and streaming on Facebook at Ministry of Information and at Ministry of Finance. Dr. Addison, over to you, sir.
Okay, thank you very much, Madam Deputy Minister Abubakar. Thank you very much, Stefan, for those initial comments. Before the minister comes in, I will also make a few comments on what the mission chief has just said. During our last interaction, I had stressed on steadfast commitment from all sides and stated that the Bank of Ghana will work on delivering its mandate on price and financial stability. The recent trends in inflation that the economy has witnessed in the course of 2023 suggest that we are on course. A year ago, at this time, inflation was around 54%. Through strong and innovative policies, tight monetary conditions, and relative exchange rate stability, inflation has been more than halved by the end of 2023 and is currently reported at 23%. Several factors have supported the disinflation process, and these include the monetary policy stance throughout the year, stable crude oil prices, which led to stable fuel prices with favorable impact on transportation costs, a relatively stable exchange rate environment, stronger foreign exchange reserve accumulation due to the Gold for Reserve program, and favorable climatic conditions on the food supply chain process. Looking ahead to 2024, our expectation is for inflation to ease further, underpinned by continued implementation of sound policies till inflation expectations are firmly anchored towards our single-digit objective. In this regard, the Bank of Ghana will continue to monitor both domestic and external developments and respond appropriately to ensure that the downward inflation trajectory observed in recent months is sustained without undermining growth. The 2023 experience of a strong reduction in inflation and stronger growth is instructive. The banking sector remains sound, liquid, and profitable. The Bank of Ghana will continue to closely monitor banks' capital restoration efforts in line with approved plans, including through support from the Ghana Financial Stability Fund, following the impact of the domestic debt exchange program. We expect early recapitalization to promote banking sector resilience and effective financial intermediation to help speed up macroeconomic recovery going forward. With a successful conclusion of the first review today, we need to begin to think of the second review of the program and beyond. While tentative indications point to sound implementation of policies through to December 2023, vigilance and commitment will be needed in 2024 to undertake all the structural reforms envisaged under the program. Implementation of these reforms to ensure the economy functions well will be critical. I will add, finally, that although a challenging year confronts us, we remain confident about the ongoing economic recovery process and would want to stress the importance of executing the needed structural reforms to support a better functioning of the economy. These reforms will be key in ensuring long-term sustainability of performance. Let me thank all stakeholders who have worked with us collaboratively to get to this point. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Addison, for the inspiring comments and assurances. We are confident that we are on the right tracks. On that note, I will yield to the Minister for Finance, Honorable Ken Ofori-Atta, for his remarks.
Thank you very much indeed, and good evening, and for most of us, a really happy New Year, Happy Shapa. So, colleague ministers, Governor, Deputy Governors, Minister of State, IMF Mission Chief for Ghana, technical staff of the Ministry of Finance and Bank of Ghana, members of the press, ladies and gentlemen. Really a great evening to you all, and let me welcome you all to the Ministry of Finance. The purpose of tonight's press conference is really to update our fellow Ghanaians on the implementation of Ghana's IMF-supported post-COVID-19 Program for Economic Growth, PCPEG, particularly the first review, and to provide a quick update on the economy and the outlook for the rest of 2024. But I think we've heard clearly from the governor on this. In that regard, it is with great honor that I can announce to you that earlier today, the International Monetary Fund endorsed the first review of our program. This is a resounding affirmation that the program is advancing steadily and our reform trajectory remains steadfast. Consequently, the endorsement has unlocked a $600 million disbursement from the IMF and will pave the way for an additional $300 million disbursement from the World Bank under the Development Policy Operation Financing. The World Bank will meet on Tuesday, January 23rd. In addition, we expect the World Bank to approve $250 million to support the Ghana Financial Stability Fund. These resources in total $1.15 billion will significantly bolster our economic recovery efforts. We are grateful to His Excellency the President of the Republic of Ghana, Nana Addo Dankwa Kofi Addo, for his unwavering leadership. We also thank the Cabinet for their moral support and the EMT led by our Vice President, Dr. Baumia, for their technical support and direction during this process. I also want to thank the Managing Director of the IMF, the senior management for the many interventions, and the IMF board for their belief in Ghana and for the support towards ensuring that we reach a deal with the official creditor committee of the Paris Club. To Stefan and the team, we say a big thank you. And to the MOS team, the midwives of our economy, Ayiko, for all the work that you do. The IMF board's approval was facilitated by the debt restructuring agreement we arrived at with official creditors on Friday, 12 January, under the G20 Common Framework for Debt Treatment. And here, we would like to truly thank France and China for their leadership. Our official creditors concurred on an ambitious rescheduling of all debt service due during the program period and a substantial maturity extension. This agreement grants us a considerable cash flow relief during the program period. Ghana will not be making payments on debt service or official bilateral creditors until the end of 2026. In light of this, I extend our deepest appreciation to our Official Creditor Committee and their Secretariat for their constructive efforts over the past few months. Indeed, we thank the co-chairs of the OCC, France, and China for their tenacity in reaching an agreement that establishes the basis for the Memorandum of Understanding. In truth, the agreement reached with official creditors is a powerful vote of confidence in our economic strategy. The gains made so far from the implementation of the IMF-supported PCPEC program has been remarkable. Indeed, the IMF described Ghana's recent macroeconomic performance in its press release after the first review as compelling performance. Generally, the macroeconomic environment continues to remain stable. Going forward, strong and ambitious structural reforms will be implemented in the areas of tax policy, public financial management, energy, and cocoa sectors to support our fiscal consolidation and growth agenda. Taken together, today's agreement marks a pivotal milestone for the successful conclusion of our domestic debt exchange program in 2023. The remarkable success of the domestic debt exchange program, attributed to the sense of responsibility exhibited by the Ghanaian people and the resilience of our institutions, has been acknowledged by the international community as a strong sign of commitment towards restoring debt sustainability. The government is committed to fully implementing the IMF-supported PCPEC, and we have put in place all the necessary implementation arrangements to make sure the program does not derail so we can fully achieve our intended objectives. Now, the final crucial step in our strategy involves the restructuring of our commercial debt, particularly our Eurobonds. The IMF board's approval of the first review and the recent agreement of official credit set the stage for our impending re-engagement with bondholders, which will commence as early as next week. We are working hard to reach agreement with our bondholders in the shortest possible time. We are optimistic that we may arrive at an agreement no later than mid-March. Allow me to assure you that we remain steadfast in our commitment to act resolutely. Ultimately, we are sure in our resolve that our economy has certainly turned the corner, and across the government will focus on attaining a more resilient, transformed economy that delivers higher living standards for our people within the shortest possible time. Ladies and gentlemen, indeed, God has given Ghana victory, and greater things he will continue to do. So we give thanks to the
$1 billion from the IMF, an additional $300 million from the World Bank, and also $250 million expected from the World Bank towards Ghana's Financial Stability Fund. From the Bank of Ghana governor, he mentioned that inflation within the past 1 year has dropped by over 30 points from 54% to 23%. Also, Ghana minister mentioned that Ghana's economic environment remains stable, and Ghana is committed to the implementation of the PCPEC program. On that note, I'll invite friends from the media. If you have any question, this is the best time to ask. If you show by hand, they will bring the microphone to you. You mention your name and affiliation, and proceed to ask your question. Thank you. Okay. Okay, I've seen 3 hands at the back, so if you can send the microphone to them. Start.
Yeah, Honorable, congratulations to you and on this milestone. When is the next review?
Name and affiliation, please.
Come again?
My
name is Echo Moses. I correspond for Bloomberg. Honorable, when is the next review? And can I go on now? Okay. When is the next review? And how much disbursement is expected? And what conditions are we going to meet or are we expected to meet for the subsequent review? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Yes.
My name is George Jaffe from Joy FM, Joy News. First one goes to Stefan Rodet. I just want some clarity. In your first review, you talked about seeing signs of recovery. I haven't seen a change in word in terms of your assessment on the economy. Are we still seeing signs of recovery, or since your last review and now, what has been the differentiating factor when it comes to the economy and the performance under the program? I want some clarity on that. Is it still signs of recovery, or we moved on from that phrase in terms of how the economy is faring? Also, what was the board or the staff's concern when it comes to spending an election year, budget overruns and all the rest? What commitment have you secured from government to ensure that in terms of spending within the approved budget and under the program, you are okay with? And that's the clarity I want from you on that one. To the finance minister, inflation is trending down. A lot of people are excited about that one. There are concerns that the new round of taxes that are about to be implemented could unwind that slowdown that we are experiencing. They are pushed that maybe government should take a second look at the timing of the implementation and whether some of the taxes can be reviewed as well. What are your thoughts on these concerns about, i.e. the taxes that are going to be implemented and how that could impact on inflation as well? Thank you.
Thank you, George. We can take 2 more questions. Yes.
Hello, good evening. My name is Michael Obudu. I work with TV3. And to the Minister, congratulations on this feat. We know that securing the deal with the OCC was crucial to getting the second tranche approval. Please help us understand. We know earlier you had wanted 30 to 40% haircut. What percentage was secured and how much savings did we make there? And then also, we've seen some positive signs with Ghana's Eurobonds since the approval of the OCC. Some had raised concerns that this whole debt exchange will impact investor confidence. Now, what is your response to such people? Thank you.
Thank you for the questions. If there are any hands, we'll take the last, for this round.
Good evening, Minister. My name is Joshua Amlanu with the Business and Financial Times. My first question has to do with, you have the expectation to meet, China and your commercial creditors. What are your expectations going to that meeting? What do you expect to gain out of the meeting? If you could give us some details going into that meeting. The second question would be, given that we've received as a country a moratorium in terms of our debt payments up until 2026 and extension with regards to the maturities, what preparations will be set in place or mechanism will be set in place in order to ensure that beyond 2026 we have the strength as a country to be able to make payment when they fall due? Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the questions.
Thank you very much indeed. Moses, I think that the next review is scheduled for maybe May 1st, 2024, and the disbursement is about half of what we have, maybe $360 million. I believe that's what it is. Why don't I get through my side, and then Stefan, I'll toss it over to you afterwards. The OCC, essentially, almost like a 2.8 billion restructuring between 2023 and 2026 So that gives us sort of the fiscal space to be able to operate much better and look at our growth strategy. It's a flow type process, so it really gives us, that necessary fiscal space to operate, which is important. The expectation during this period, as you are talking about post 2026, is that our revenue collection process gets stronger as we've also tightened our expenditure controls. We can see from GRA, I believe it was maybe 57 billion CDs that they were able to raise in 2021. 2022 went up to 75 billion, and then this year they did 113.2 billion. So you can see a gradual increase in strength, and therefore it was about 43%, 49% over nominal of the previous year. Our expectation is that with VAT, etc., by the time we get to that period, we'll have adequate resources to be able to meet the obligations that you are talking about. Eurobond, what do we expect? We met the steering committee representative in Marrakesh, and they gave us a proposal. We also met more of the investors in London somewhere in October, in which we kind of broadly outlined that we'll be looking for a haircut of some 20 to 40%, 20 years and under 5%. That took a hit in the market place. But I think now we all have more information, what has happened with the domestic exchange, what the OCC is doing. So that will guide us into a resolution that I think will be fair for everyone. So I think we are quite excited. We've been forthright in these dealings. Ghana has also burden shared considerably. We expect that we'll have very cordial and progressive discussions going forward. So we are looking forward to those discussions. And really, I think the program so far is quite clear. It's not only an issue of where we were some time ago, but clearly all of us are seeing the hard work being done, exchange stability. It's clear Bank of Ghana resolute in the monetary policy. The increased reserve is comforting. And to a certain degree, I know we wanted to go have the board meeting in November 2022 of last year. I believe, as I said, maybe the Lord tarries, but he's never late, and maybe this might be the best time to have been doing this to give us confidence to start the year. Thank you very much. Stefan, over to you.
In terms of engagement under the fund program and the next review. So the next review indeed will be the second review of the program. It will be a review that assesses performance at the end of December 2023. So we have quantitative objectives under the program that need to be met for end 2023. And that review will assess performance in this context. It will assess performance on reforms as well. It will also revised projections as we do at each review. In terms of timeline, we have not discussed with the authorities yet exactly the date of the mission, but logically it should take place probably early April, I would say, indeed, with the objective of going to the board in May or early June. So that's the sort of the broad timeline that we have in mind, but we still need to discuss the details, and in particular the scheduling of the review mission with the authorities. I wanted to say a few words to respond to George's question about our assessments of economic development. So that the assessment has not changed. It is the same now than it was during the mission or at the end of the first review mission in early October, except that developments since then have continued to go in the right direction. So the assessment is even more optimistic now than it was at the time, I would say. And the assessment is one of coming to the conclusion that there are signs of stabilization in the economy, that inflation is going down very rapidly, that the external and the fiscal position are turning around, international reserves are accumulating. All of that is very good sign, and more progress since the review mission in October. And then the other part of the assessment is that economic activity is performing better than what we had in mind. And this is why we are revising our growth projections up in the context of this in this review. A few words about expenditure performance in 2024 as the government is going into elections. You know, we have objectives under the program, both in terms of spending. Those are codified in the budget that was approved by Parliament and enacted. We have targets, quantitative targets under the program. Performance so far has been good. We hear about the very strong commitment that the authorities have made to continue to follow the program objectives, and that makes us quite optimistic, I would say.
Maybe I could come in with just a response to that last question from George regarding the impact of taxes on inflation, and to say that that is not necessarily the case, and that taxes and inflation, if you look at it in a sense, it's a withdrawal of income that is going to those that are paying the taxes, and to the extent that it helps in the fiscal consolidation process, it should not necessarily lead to an increase in inflation. In fact, the Bank of Ghana would continue to manage the inflation side of the macro. And if you look at where we are with today's rate of inflation of 23%, we are probably even lower than the monetary policy consultation clause, the lower bound of that inflation. And we tried to explain to you why that was the case. We have seen the exchange rate perform rather strongly than initially envisaged. And we have also tried to explain that as partly due to the stronger reserve accumulation that we have seen because of the gold for reserves program. So the increases in taxes should not necessarily lead to higher inflation. In this instance, we expect it to help improve fiscal consolidation and therefore help us in bringing overall, macro pressures down.
Thank you so much, Dr. Addison, Honorable Minister, and Stefan. We will take the last set of questions. If there are any hands or any follow-ups, this is the best time to ask. If there are no hands, okay, I've seen 2 hands at the back. Okay, so him first because he's not asked any question.
I'm Maxwell Adumbila Reuters. I just want to confirm or be sure that the next review and the next payout is not related or tied to the whatever happens with the Eurobond holders. And then relatedly, the issue of comparability of treatment. Minister, I hear you allude to what happened in the domestic exchange the domestic side of the debt restructuring relative to what our bondholders should be willing to take. But how is the discussion with the bondholders related to whatever happened with the bilateral creditors in the context of comparability of treatment?
Thank you, Kof.
All right, just a follow-up, and this is to Stefan and by extension to the governor. Stefan, do you think that given these projections you just talked about, do we definitely need to have a very tight monetary policy stance going forward? Because 30% is really, really high. And if inflation is slowing, is that really any concern to you at all? Thank you.
Thank you. I saw 2 hands here. If you can pass the microphone. Okay, go ahead.
This to the IMF chief. When should we expect the disbursement of the 600 million? Thank you.
Thank you, Joshua. The last question.
Okay, my name is Neil Atilati, CTFM City TV. Honorable Minister, are we to expect a reduced appetite for treasury bills, given the fact that you're expecting about 1.15 billion from the IMF and also the World Bank, if you put the disbursement together? Are we to expect a reduced appetite from your end because the subscriptions are happening, yet the yields are high, and the government keeps borrowing, and if it affects the country's debt levels?
Thank you for the questions, Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much indeed. Maxwell, I think the challenge in all of these negotiations is that they're quite complex, and it leaves sort of debt management and negotiating skills to land in a proper way. So it's always very difficult to know. But I think one thing that goes with negotiations is the issue of trust and whether you've also taken a hit yourself. And I think we have, and we have shown that we have paid our dues. So we go with pretty clean hands. And the issue you referred to is what happened to Zambia. Later went on to get an agreement with the and the OCC debt was much more than the Eurobond holders. I think ours is reversed, and we already, put out in October sort of the broad parameters that we are going to look at. As you mentioned, the bonds even strengthened over the weekend. So there's a certain acknowledgement that we are all working in the same direction. And how do we strike a deal that will be fair to all parties? And really, that's the spirit in which we will look at. The issue of comparability of treatment gets very complicated, and at the end of the day, some fairness is what we will have to work at. We would like to, in particular, get a very simple structure for the new instruments that we'll have. So it is what we'll be looking to do that. I think elections is a question that keeps coming as to whether we'll be able to keep the horses in the barn. And I believe we will. I think we all went through a very difficult 2022 period in which all citizens or politicians saw the devastation that can happen when inflation soars and the currency wobbles to the way that it did. So that will be first and foremost if you want to look at any strong election victory. So we'll have to, by the nature of it, work to make sure we keep the program in place. In addition to that, with each review will be about $360 million, maybe twice this year, possibly. And those will be resources that will be required. So I think we'll have to stick to the program to make sure that release occurs. So those are some of the guardrails that we'll see to. But I think deeply it's going to become our own discipline in expenditure management, which then will flow into City. Your question about how to then manage the whole treasury bill market. I mean, one of the key issues for us, of course, is the payment of the restructured debt or the domestic, which will be in February, and we'll get ready for it. But the stronger that GRA continues to perform, the more disciplined we are of our expenses. You know, that pressure for more public financing will be reduced on the treasury bill side. So that's what we see. I think the issue of disbursement, Stefan, that question is directly for you.
Thank you, Minister. So the 600 million disbursement is really, it's imminent. I believe the funds should be available to the central bank already. It's a matter of hours, not a matter of certainly not a matter of days or weeks. On your question on the monetary policy stance, of course, I would like to, the governor will come in on this. I would say we are very happy about the path, the disinflationary path that we are seeing. Inflation is still too high. Of course, 23% is too high. And so I would say in this context that it is important for the central bank to keep a sufficiently tight monetary policy stance. But that does not mean that interest rates should remain at 30% plus forever. If we continue to see that inflation decreasing, it will certainly create room for the central bank to alleviate the burden on that front. And that's certainly what we are planning for in the context of the program. Our projections also assume that interest rates at some point will be lower, and that is consistent with also the projections that we made in terms of inflation continuing to decrease going forward. With regard to the links between the discussions between the government and its external private creditors and the link between that and the review, I would remind you that and this is applied already at the time of the program approval and this morning again at the time of the completion of the first review, that the standard on that front, we applied what we call the lending into official arrears policy. What is very important is that the government engages in good faith negotiations with its external private creditors for our board to be comfortable with the progress that is being made. So that will continue to be the standard going forward. We do hope, of course, for a rapid conclusion to those discussions. It's certainly in the interest of Ghana, and we very much hope that good progress can be made in the next few weeks.
So let me come to this monetary policy question on whether we are going to continue with a tight monetary policy stance. As Stefan said, a tight monetary policy stance does not mean that the policy rate has to stay at 30%. The last MPC press conference, we had said that the rate will be tighter for longer to ensure that inflation expectations are anchored towards a single-digit objective. But that doesn't mean that between getting to the single digits, you would not see a downward trend in the policy rate. We expect that the MPC would be meeting very soon, and then we would have a discussion on where to direct the decisions on the policy rate, and hoping to provide some guidance on the market, on the domestic market, particularly the auction for the treasury bill. So the decision at this particular MPC meeting, we hope, would feed through to the auction after that meeting. Thank you.
The IMF Mission Chief for Ghana, Mr. Stefan Rode, the Governor of the Bank of Ghana, Dr. Ernest Addison, the Minister for Finance, Honorable Ken Ofori-Atta. Thank you so much for making time for this important exercise. I would also like to thank our media partners for the live coverage GTV, Joy News, City TV, TV3, Metro TV, Asasi Radio, Oman FM, ABC News, GH, and Wontumi TV. On that note, I will invite Ms. Ruth Botio for the acknowledgements and closing prayers. Ruth, over to you.
Thank you, Honorable.
All right, so you had the Ghana's finance minister and Stefan Rode, who is the boss of the IMF, as well as Ghana's governor of its bank, central bank, all of them talking about this agreement with the IMF board. But there are certain things that we need to, tease out for you, and Kofi Addo is still here with me. So Kofi, let's start with what the IMF boss said. What are the key things that we need to look out for in a statement?
So first thing that caught my attention from Stefan Rode, who is the mission chief of the IMF to Ghana, that going forward, the next disbursement or reviews, what will be the conditions? Something he said, though maybe he said it indirectly, is that we are supposed to now start to make very significant progress with our negotiations with our private creditors, which in essence is talking about the commercial or the Eurobond creditors that we've submitted that 20 to 40% haircut on the bonds or principal. That is going to be very difficult. Now you have to pay attention to some of these key figures that I'm about to mention. In terms of inflation, for instance, if you look at the press release that the IMF put out, inflation is expected to ease. By the end of this year, we are supposed to reach somewhere around 15%. Now, we are also looking at, revenue to GDP ratio. The reason why revenue to GDP ratio is because, government expenditure and revenue mobilization is key to this program. We are supposed to increase revenue to GDP ratio from 15.7% last year. By the end of this year, we should be hitting somewhere around 16.7% percent of GDP. Expenditure commitment in an election year, we're expecting that expenditure commitment on commitment basis should come down a bit, but we are supposed to see it rise from 20.4 to 21.7%. And the last one, Brace, let me talk about the debt to GDP ratio, which is significant. We are expecting to reach about 50%. But if you look at the estimate, we could be ending 2024 with about 83.6% of GDP.
All right, let's bring in Professor John Gachi, who has stayed with us all this while. Prof, so, you had some sort of expectations before this news conference. What's your view after listening to the joint press conference there?
Well, nothing has changed so far. You will realize that they are much more concerned about the macro indicators. For them, they see inflation go down. That is good for them. They are not speaking so much about how we are going to spur growth, how we are going to ensure inclusive growth, how we are get the productive sector moving, how we are going to get manufacturing picking up. Those are not the discussion, but those are the things that concerns us so much. And it's also very clear that if you listen to the governor and Stefan, it is likely if we take their words, then by the close of the year, we may not see the policy rate going down, because they tend to indicate that where we were last year, we have not gotten there with the drop down in inflation. It is when we get there that the inflation rate will be triggering downward trend in policy rate. And that is a disturbing comment to make. Also, they are thinking that whatever have been agreed in the budget will be used to measure fiscal discipline. And that is also very problematic, because the IMF doesn't have any other tool to use. If you have approved an amount of money for some project and the money is being disbursed to them, you are just executing the budget. And I said during the processing of the budget that there are areas of the budget that when they are approved, expenditure on those areas are the areas that will be used for election year expenditure. So it's not necessary that election year expenditure will be out of the way. To be seen glaringly. And finally, he indicated the way they are measuring commitments to social intervention and the vulnerable is the increase in the budget for LEAP. But I beg to differ. If you want to deal with the issues.
All right, so that's Professor John Gachi. They're grateful for staying through with us. But let's cross over to the Finance Ministry. George Weah is engaging, another president engaging the Finance Minister. Let's cross over.
Maintain the expenditure, and then the central bank continues to build its reserves. I think we are going to be fine. It's going to be a flourishing and prosperous year. Thank you.
Honorable Minister, the bit about the taxes bit.
Okay, let's go. The governor was clear to you that it's not going to be inflationary, but more important, I mean, we have all sorts of tax reliefs that you don't want to talk about, and with regards to the taxes on electricity, that was some time ago, and it doesn't affect, sort of the lifeline tax people. And so I think we should be all right. The emissions tax, as you know, is really 100 cedis a year. That's what we are praying about. 15% or 15% plus NHI. You want all of that analysis right now? No. I think we'll be okay. Yeah?
Okay. Okay. It's okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So that was Ghana's Finance Minister. And on that note, we are grateful to you for staying through with us here on our special programming of the joint news conference between Ghana's Finance Ministry, the Bank of Ghana, and the IMF. Well, there will be more of that on Prime Business, which comes right after this. Stay on, and thanks for being a part of us.